welcome to tonight's live show. It's been a while since we've gone live, and you want to know something? It's been even longer since we've had a guest, and I'm really excited for tonight's guest because, well, I mean, you already know who it is because you're watching this video. You know who it is, but I have to tell you, it's been really sort of inspiring to watch Drew do his show, the New York Hardcore Chronicles live on his channel, and it's definitely given me rocket fuel to kind of do what I do in my own kind of way. I sort of have watched the show over the years, and it's amazing just to watch how all these incredible people come onto the show, and it really is kind of like the go-to place for, I would say, alternative rock interviews, right? Drew Stone is an interesting cat because he's a Renaissance man. He's what you would call a polymath. He might not see himself in that way, but he really does do it all. He does it all. He's a filmmaker. He does, he's a musician. He does the live stream podcast thing. I know he's done some walking tour stuff, and I'm really glad to have him on the show. He's in the digital green room, so we're going to bring him out. And I have to be extra good tonight. I have to be on top because I'm having an interviewer on as my guest, and that makes the stakes extra high because this guy's a pro. So I got to make sure that I mind my P's and Q's. I cross the T's and I dot the I's. Okay. Enough preamble. Let's bring him out. Here is Drew Stone. Uh-oh, he's already given me, look at this. He's already cutting me a new one. Oh my God. He's already cutting me to ribbons.
What's
Welcome,
up?
Drew. Hi, how are you?
What's up, everyone out there? And thanks for having me, Jeff. And I'm glad that I somewhat inspired you in some regard. And so, yeah, you better
I gotta be on my best game.
And already I see some of the stalwarts of the New York Hardcore Chronicles live filling up your chat room. I see Ray Hogan. I see Gajewski. Yeah, Ray Hogan says, any truth to Incendiary Device will be touring with Goat Penis.
Oh, I'm not familiar with Goat Penis. They sound phallic.
Yeah, they're like a death metal band.
Oh, okay.
So I think they are. With a name like Goat Penis, they should be.
No,
but anyway.
Well, question for you.
Yeah.
Right off the start, when did you start doing like the live streaming show?
The New York Hardcore Chronicles live started basically like the second day of the pandemic. Like there was like the pandemic hit, and like the very next day, we launched it, and I was just in a lot of ways at the right place in the right time. With the right kind of show. Everybody was trapped inside, and the hardcore community. I mean, my shows basically deals with the subgenre of punk or American hardcore, and it's a real community, and everybody was sort of trapped inside. And I presented a alternate community. I mean, people could meet up, and I don't want to say I got lucky, but I was in the right place in the right time, and I seized the moment, and the show just really took off right out of the gate. I mean, the numbers were astonishing. Me and my dad, we would look, because I started in my dad's kitchen in Florida. I was kind of stranded down there for the pandemic, and me and him would look, and we'd be like, wait a second, this can't be right. Like 5,000 people just watch this. We were just sort of like, what? It took a little while for us to understand exactly what was going on. And then, it was great. And yeah, I want to shout out Astoria Lou. He says 5 years anniversary is coming up for the show. So it's been a while. It's been over 370 shows. So,
it's crazy. So what's interesting now, here's the parallel to that is that March 22nd is my 5-year anniversary for live streaming as well.
Congratulations.
But what I saw when I saw you guys doing it, I was like, oh, I should start to try and interview people. That would be interesting. Let me, kind of looking at how you format and then realizing I can't do it to that kind of degree that you guys are doing it. But It's a really great sort of musical format. And then, you've kind of turned that New York hardcore, flyer, you do the digital flyers. It's kind of become its own kind of brand. You know what I mean?
Well, it's all a lot. Thank you. And a lot of things have fallen into place for the show to be successful. And that was one of them. We sort of, and it didn't happen overnight, the films I directed, the music videos that I was involved in, the New York Hardcore Chronicles film that I directed,
right,
which gave birth to the New York Hardcore Chronicles page on Facebook, which has over 100,000 people on it. The show I started streams live onto that as well, So
now your dad,
a lot of it wasn't just random. A lot of things spent years. A lot of the blocks were put in place.
Right, the building blocks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now your dad, so you're filmmaking, cinematography, videography. That's like the family. That's like the Stone family business, it seems, or in one way or another, because your dad was part of an Academy Award-winning film that featured Mel Brooks.
That's right. My dad grew up in New York City, in the Bronx, and at a young age, his father walked out on the family, and his mother was sick, and my dad and my uncle ended up in a orphanage in the Lower East Side of New York City, right on Houston Street, and which is part of the reason why I always feel so connected to that neighborhood and that area, and the matinees that we do is that I have deep roots there. So my dad grew up in an orphanage right on Houston Street, right in the Lower East Side. And my dad was, ran around in a rough and tumble crew in the Bronx once he got out. He was part of a Jewish street gang called the Stallions. And back then, like the Stallions, it was like they had a football team, they had a car, they had like a clubhouse, they wore the jackets, and and they fought with the other crews, and my dad was a feared brawler, which I found out later in life. But what really my dad's saving grace was he went into the Army at a pretty young age. I think he was given the choice between jail or the Army or something like that, which is what they used to do back then, and the Army he credits the Army with really turning his life around and giving him a sense of responsibility, and he really disciplined and created a regimen for himself. And when he came out, he had a couple of jobs, but he ended up getting a job back then in boxing matches. Boxing matches were shot on film, and after every round, they would download the film from the camera, and they would give that round to a messenger who would run it to the film lab, and they would develop that so after every round they would download it. They'd have multiple messengers, and my dad, there was a fight at the old Madison Square Garden, and he ran film to the lab, and that was my dad's first job in the film business. And eventually, one thing led to the other, and he ended up involved with some people and an editor. He became somewhat of an editor and an animator, and then he did a short. He won an Academy Award for Best Short Film in 1963 for a film called The Critic with Mel Brooks. And you could look it up. You could look it up and see it on YouTube. It's called The Critic. It's a great. It really was a kind of a groundbreaking animated film with Mel Brooks doing the voice on it. And then after that, my dad just became a film director and did a lot of work with a lot of people through the years. He directed a Muhammad Ali documentary that we re-released a couple years ago, and he did a lot of commercials. He did a few features, but a lot of commercials. But I grew up on film sets, and I grew up. Film was a big part of my family growing up. Like we'd go to the movies a couple times a week when I was growing up. You know, it's
what would you see when you would go to the movies? What was the typical fare?
In the 70s, we saw everything, man. I mean, I saw everything. And I remember seeing, a lot of films that were like highly inappropriate for like sure. An 11-year-old. Because if you remember the films a lot of the films in the 70s, like every film had some like rape scene in it, or there was
very
a lot
transgressive, very
transgressive. Yeah. And I remember seeing films that were really kind of over my head and slightly disturbing as a very young person. I mean, I remember seeing The Great Gatsby with Robert Redford, and I remember all those 70s. We saw all those 70s movies, man. That's just, it's what we did in my household. My uncle was also was a film editor, and he followed my father into the film business. He was an editor on the Paul Newman film The Hustler, and a lot of other stuff. And of course, nowadays, my brother is a cinematographer and film director. My cousin Alan Dubin is a color corrector and editor. So I just really came up in the film business. But especially with my dad and my uncle. My uncle was did a lot of work as a film editor. Did a lot of commercials. All those, you remember the Miller Lite commercials? Less filling,
Miller time.
No, less filling, tastes great. Less filling, tastes great. My uncle edited, a lot of those, and a lot of stuff. So, film was part of my thing growing up. It was the film business. I was on a lot of film sets, and job to me, like a job for me was always something in the film business. And like at a very young age, one of my first jobs was, I worked in a movie equipment rental house, and I learned about all the lights and all the equipment and how to fix the stuff. And I would do pickups and drop-offs in the van with movie equipment, and really became knowledgeable about film equipment. And
you earned your bones.
And then I was a stage manager on a couple of film stages in New York later on, and that turned out to be pretty incredible because of the people that came through these film stages. I would connect with, and a lot of the music videos, and I worked on a lot of the real early music videos and stuff like that before I started my production company and before we went on this run, and did music videos, if all that makes sense.
Now, when I think of New York, when you're talking about New York and seeing movies in the 70s in New York, I'm also thinking of like Times Square, 42nd Street, and like, the sort of like the sleazy sort of whatever you would call the movie theaters of that time. Were you around, or was there any bleed through with any of like those, splatter films that were happening in New York in like the mid 80s? Like I Was a Teenage Zombie, Brain Damage, Frankenhooker, Toxic Avenger, any of that stuff. Were you involved with any of those circles at all?
No, not really at that point. In the early 80s, I sort of went on a different trajectory. I was up in Boston studying acting, and I fell into the hardcore thing. But, I certainly remember a lot of films before that. And when I was working in movie equipment rental houses, we would supply equipment on a lot of stuff like that. It was later that I was like working as a crew person on films like that. But I certainly remember, I remember Lloyd Kaufman and Troma Studios very, very, very early on in the game. Like, right. I think we supplied some equipment for the original Toxic Avenger and stuff like that. Scott Gajewski asked something really interesting. Didn't Arnie, my father, come up with the Yoo-Hoo logo or name? And the logo that you see on Yoo-Hoo, right? Yoo-Hoo soft drink. My dad created that, and
wow,
because Yoo-Hoo originally was a very small local brand in Florida, and my dad directed those commercials. Yogi Berra was the spokesman. I think Yogi Berra owned a piece of it. It was Iroquois Brands, and early on they they were so new that they didn't really have a logo. And my dad created this logo, and the colors that you see, that Yoo-Hoo logo that is still on the can today, those colors are my dad. My dad went to high school at Taft High School in the Bronx. Not that he graduated, but those are the Taft High School colors that he used in the Yoo-Hoo logo.
How about that?
Yeah. So if you see any of if you see a Yoo-Hoo logo, that's my dad created that, and that's yeah.
So Ray here asked a question before. He said, "What was the most hardcore mass appeal movie of the 1970s?" And he says he has two in mind: The Deer Hunter and The Exorcist. And while obviously this isn't, there's another movie I want to throw into the lot with that. I think when you say hardcore, do you mean like, Ray, do you mean like transgressive, or like what Drew was saying, or, you know, just in the sense of like, maybe like shocking and big? And obviously I wasn't around in the 70s, but when I look back historically, what about Jaws, man? Like the idea of Jaws, like you have a little kid that gets eaten like at like a third into the movie, and just like seeing this giant shark eating people, that like that had to have been pretty gnarly and disturbing at the time. Drew, what do you think?
I'm a little bit older than a lot of you guys, so I remember when these films came out, and these are films that, you know, that we're talking about. I cannot emphasize the Exorcist was when it came out. I mean, adults were like running out of the movie theater. The Exorcist, you know, at the time was an extremely distressing film for a lot of people. I mean, in retrospect, now you have, you know, look in 2025, films that are just so gory and slasher films, that stuff didn't exist back then. The Exorcist was very disturbing. I think first and foremost because it felt real. It felt like, it really felt real. It wasn't like some bizarre monster movie. It really felt real. Jaws 2, of course, was horrifying. I mean, a lot of people didn't go in the water for a long time, including myself. That was really freaking scary. You know, Jaws was really a scary thing. Yeah, The Exorcist changed a lot. It really did, and there were so many copycat films after that. But it really, Last House on the Left. Yeah, people were vomiting.
Last House of the Left.
You know,
is like,
Rosemary's Baby was a great film. Also, Larry mentions that. Texas Chainsaw, but Rosemary's Baby, directed by Roman Polanski. I'm a big fan of Roman Polanski as a director. And
you ever see Fearless Vampire Killers?
That was the early one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one
for sure. But The Pianist was really great, and you know, but yeah, Jaws was disturbing, and what else do I remember being really?
You know what's crazy about Jaws though? I got to tell you, it wasn't, you know, I've seen Jaws hundreds and hundreds of times. I mean, we've all seen Jaws a billion times on TV, whatever. But it wasn't until like maybe in the last 5 years that I realized that like the whole third act of that movie is Moby Dick. Like I was like, how did that not cross my mind? Like Quint is literally Captain Ahab. I just like never even occurred to me. I was like, well, great white shark, great white whale. Of course. My God. It's crazy.
Yeah, Chinatown's a great film. We just rewatched that recently. We recently went on a 70s film binge and watched a lot of stuff. And
what do you think of Dawn of the Dead?
The original,
78, Dawn of the Dead.
But not Night of the Living Dead, right?
No, Night of the Living Dead is 68. Dawn of the Dead is 78.
Is Dawn of the Dead the one in the mall with Ving Rhames?
Well, that's the 2004 remake directed by Zack Snyder, but the original film was the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, directed by George Romero in 1978, that took place in the Monroeville Mall with what's his face? Tom Savini is in it, and
I vaguely thought the other one directed by Zack Snyder I enjoyed thoroughly. I thought that was very good, and I happen to be a big fan of The Walking Dead and zombie films in general. So yeah, absolutely. You know, it was a really a film. I guess it came out in '78, which was really well done. was the original film Alien.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I love all 4 Alien movies, but the first one is really on another level because, you know, it's essentially a haunted house in outer space. Like that's not a spaceship. That's a haunted house.
Well, it's a remake. It's actually a remake of It, Terror from Outer Space.
And Planet of the Vampires too.
But if
Mario Bava.
A film I saw as a young person, It, Terror from Outer Space, verbatim. They land on a planet. The thing gets onto the spaceship. They go back up into space. The monsters in the spaceship. It makes its way. You know,
all the beats.
And at the very end, it's they're got their backs against the wall. The thing breaks through, and they open up the airlock and suffocate it. So
how about that?
It's very, very, very. It's a great film, and I remembered it vividly from my childhood. You know, it was a huge film that we're talking about these kind of films. Huge film for me. Growing up was the original Planet of the Apes.
One of first of all, I love the whole series.
Yeah.
Original Planet of the Apes, one of my all-time favorite films. And you know what's crazy about that? So that came out in March of 1968. Martin Luther, and you know, it's supposed to be, you know, all great sci-fi and horror is political in some way, shape, or form. There's social commentary, you know, underneath, you know, the story, right? In some way, shape, or form. That's obviously about the civil rights movement, in Planet of the Apes. Then April of 1968, friggin' Martin Luther King Jr. gets assassinated. And then what comes out in 1968 in October? Fucking Night of the Living Dead. And when you juxtapose Night of the Living Dead and Planet of the Apes around the year 1968, the civil rights movement, just everything that was going on, it really is kind of mind-boggling. The contrast in the tone of like what people are talking about, like socially, you know, and especially with the shocking ending of Night of the Living Dead. So,
Night of the Living Dead, I remember as a young person, you know, it was something that was on late night. It was like on Channel 9 or Channel 11, and as a young person watching that, and it was a really scary film for a young person.
Oh my God, forget about it. I can't even imagine. So before we talk about, I want to talk about your movie as well, but let's first
Which one?
Well, here's what's interesting. You talk about your dad being, you know, and it's funny hearing you talk about your dad. Kind of, there are a lot of. I'm also of Jewish stock from New York. My, you know, Brooklyn. My grandparents are from Brooklyn. My grandfather was in World War II at 17.
Wow.
My great grandfather fought in World War I. He was in the Navy. And he had red hair, and they called him the Irish Jew. He ran a speakeasy, and he had one of those blackjacks that he would, you know, make you, you know, all those Jews, they had to be tough back then, you know, like really sort of tough. But you mentioned that your father found discipline in the army and like order in that kind of way. And how did that inform you finding punk rock, and how did that contrast with you being into punk rock and maybe your father, you know, being a man of like, you know, order and discipline? Was there?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying my dad was a man of order and discipline. It just basically saved him from a life of crime, basically.
Gotcha.
My dad was certainly not a stern disciplinarian or anything like that. And you know, the way that I got into, if you want to call it punk rock, you know, we you know, or whatever, is I went to Emerson College in Boston to study acting. I managed to pull myself out of a tailspin after getting thrown out of a couple of high schools here in New York City, including John F. Kennedy High School in the Bronx, which at the time was basically impossible to do. But I ended up getting tossed out, and but I pulled myself out of a nosedive, and I ended up at Emerson College to study acting. And while I was there, as soon as I got there, basically, I ended up at a very early hardcore show in 1981, and I saw a band called SSD Control, and it was kids my age. And it, you know, before that, bands and music, like the music I was into before that, the Rolling Stones, Frank Zappa, the Allman Brothers Band, the Grateful Dead, what have you. All the kind of class, Led Zeppelin, some Southern rock stuff. All these bands were basically, it was like idol worship, and they were just untouchable, So I didn't really have contact with kids my age playing music. And when I went to my first hardcore show, it was kids my age. It was for us, by us, and
Sure.
As soon as that band was done playing, they approached me. They wanted to know who I was, in a good way, and where I was from. And I just fell in with this crew up there, and we kind of became the original Boston crew. And I got swept up in the early American hardcore scene, and I ended up in a band, and I was just part of that other thing. It was a really vibrant, exciting time. It was a youth movement.
Yeah.
And I as a young person, I got swept up in it, and it was really exciting. It was a real even playing field early on, for boys. I won't even say for men and women. It was boys and girls, It was not men and women. It was boys and girls, because everybody was a teenager, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, that's what happened. And then it was very hard for me to go to class, and Emerson was very competitive, and I just had a hard time with it. I was kind of like busy, running around in this community.
Yeah.
And it was hard to sort of, it felt very special also, in retrospect. And of course, at the time, it felt very special. And I sort of recognized it. I recognized it as such, even in 1981.
That's amazing. And it's, I feel like the thing that I find so appealing and interesting about this youth movement is the idea of sort of like self-actualization, self-realization. You know what I mean? Like, for people that did not necessarily fit the traditional mold, or, go the traditional route of whatever it is that you're supposed to do, and finding sort of, fulfillment in, artistic, being artistic, and, being entrepreneurial, whether you were successful or not, because you're doing everything yourself, right? So it is. Go ahead.
100%. There was room on the boat for everybody. And the DIY message, or what I took for it, was, get up, get out, and make it happen. And it was inviting to everyone. And, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people found their place in it. Whether, hey, look, if you weren't in a band, then you started a fanzine, or
Right.
you brought a camera and you took pictures,
Yeah.
or you became a promoter, or you became like
Love
a
that.
merch person.
Mhm.
There was room on the boat for everybody. There was a year there from like 81 to 82 where it was halcyon. It was really special. And then, other elements started, creeping their way in. But I'd say there was like 1 year there where it was a real us versus them mentality. And it was very vibrant, very exciting. Very special.
How, in your own words, how, having like seen both scenes up front, how did Boston contrast and compare to, say, what was going on in New York at those times?
Well, I happen to be one of the very few people that sort of lived both to a certain extent. I was in Boston, from 81 to 83. And while I was there, spent a bunch of time back in New York, going to shows. And when Boston bands would come down to New York to play A7 or CBGBs, we'd all come down. And even in like 82 and 83, I was in Boston, we would come down, and that's how I met a lot of the New York guys, like Vinny Stigma and Roger Moret later to form Agnostic Front, and Harley Flanagan or Jimmy G, Murphy's Law, Ray Bees, Doug Holland, all those kind of people. And so it wasn't like I did this and then I did that. I was in Boston. I started to get connected to New York, and then I moved back to New York. It's a really loaded question. How is the Boston scene different than the DC scene? But I think in a lot of ways the early New York scene sort of a lot of it came out of the New York punk scene, and punk started in New York, and you had the Lower East Side, and there was a lot of rough and tumble characters coming out of the Lower East Side, and drugs were very prevalent in the New York hardcore scene early on. In Boston, it was a little bit different. It wasn't, Boston's a college town. And so you had a lot of kids that were into the Boston hardcore scene, including myself, who were up there going to college. So you had a lot of college early, people were still young in college. I mean, you're a freshman in college, you're what, 18, 19 years old. And drugs weren't as prevalent in the Boston thing. It certainly wasn't fueled by drugs. And there was a bit of a straight edge contingent in Boston, which sort of overshadowed everything else, from SSD Control and led by Al Baril and all that. But it was a little bit different. I know people talk about like the problems, the beef between New York and Boston. That happened later. In 81 and 82, and even in early 83, when Boston bands would come down, for the most part, early on, it was all good. There was no problems. That happened a little bit later on, that whole Boston, New York thing.
Right. What let me ask you this. What about like the transition from, and again, think about the terminology that I'm using in this question from a historical perspective, looking back at that time, meaning that if I was in that time, I might not use these labels, but I'm using them in the year 2025.
I think that's the case with a lot now. In retrospect, we have the terminology to sort of to grapple with like I said, back then it wasn't even called hardcore. But go ahead.
Right. So, but that's the thing. Like in the same way that, the very first generation of whatever you want to call it, punk rock in, whatever, like 71 to like 75 is more of a scene than it is a music. There's no musical genre. It's a scene where everybody's doing something slightly different, but all kind of getting lumped in, and they don't call themselves punk. It's just a title that gets bestowed upon them. And then you have this sort of idea of like whatever punk, like 77 punk, punk being a household name. The Sex Pistols happen suddenly. Punk is in every the terminology of the word punk is in an international sphere. When does the transition occur from being punk to being hardcore? I'm thinking 79 to 80 into 81, right? Like somewhere there. And is where is it happening, and yada yada yada, and talk about that.
The way that I see it or lived it is we didn't. I know it's called slam dancing now, but at the time we called it thrashing, because it wasn't really called slam dancing. We kind of called it thrashing, but DOA, the band DOA, put a record out
called
Hardcore 81.
Right.
That was sort of the first like terminology that this is hardcore, and that was 1981. And then that's when the I think after that it's like this stuff, this supercharged punk stuff, we are going to refer to it and label it as hardcore. And bands like Bad Brains, Minor Threat, Black Flag, early on, like these to us, these were hardcore bands.
Now those bands, what's interesting too is that
and not to be confused with the Misfits.
But here's what's crazy about every single band you just named. They all kind of start in like 76, 77. some of them are contemporaries. Like the Misfits, for a time, are a New York band that are contemporaries with all the bands that are playing Max's, right? Like they're a Max's band playing Max's Kansas City, you know. Same thing with Dead Kennedys. Well, they're not playing Max Kansas City, but you know what I mean? Like they all came up in 76, 77 or 78, like Bad Brains, and they somehow made that transition. They somehow were able to bridge the gap from, being a punk band to being a hardcore band. And I don't know, is that just because they're like, here's an interesting question. Why doesn't a band like the Dead Boys make that transition, or at least get classified in that kind of way, in the same way that some of those other bands do?
Well, I think the music became harder and faster. It turned a corner at a certain point, and some bands like the Dead Boys. I mean, the Dead Boys kind of were done already by the time. I mean,
right.
I know they did reunion shows, but
that was in the 80s.
The real game changer in all this was the Bad Brains. And when the Bad Brains put out the Roar cassette in 1981, I'm telling you, it was an absolute game changer. We put that thing in, and we would play one side, this for 1 month straight. One side, flip it over to the other side, flip it back over. It's all we listened to. Literally, it's all we listened to for like a month. Nothing else. It was just mind-blowing. And their shows, the Bad Brains shows, were magical at that time. If you saw them, they did this incredible thing where they would like do a couple of triple speed hardcore songs and then do a reggae song and sort of like cool it down and then bust out some hardcore songs. Like that dynamic was really incredible. The only thing that I can compare that to was like some Grateful Dead shows that I've been to.
Wait, why?
Because of the dynamic of the music, where they would play like something really upbeat,
right,
like a Chuck Berry song, and get the place really rocking out. And then Jerry Garcia would do
Johnny Be Good. They'd play Johnny Be Good.
And then they would do like a Garcia ballad, and everybody, it would just settle down. And but also the community and the culture, the same sort of feeling in the air. Because I saw the Grateful Dead many times, and I saw early on, I saw a lot of really great Grateful Dead shows. And so I know, as bizarre as it sounds, but there are some incredible similarities between the Grateful Dead community and the hardcore community. It's all the same shit, brother. It's all it's all community and culture, and it's all community and culture. And one thing that I've learned from doing my show and interviewing so many people and doing the documentary films is, a lot of these scenes, it's the faces have changed and the music's different, but a lot of it is very similar. A youth-driven movement, whether it's the goth scene or the hardcore scene or the original punk scene or the Grateful Dead scene. There's a sort of a template, you know what I mean? A lot of these scenes hit the same notes. None of them are unique in that regard. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I mean, when you think about like youth movements, like going back to the 50s, you had the Teds, and you had, all that stuff from like all the English class youth movements that sort of progressed through the years. Same thing.
I see Gajewski says, I'd give my left nut to have seen the Bad Brains in 82, and other people. And he also mentioned Minor Threat. Back then, there were a couple bands like in 81, 82 that I saw many times, and any chance we could get, we'd go see Minor Threat, the Bad Brains, and the Misfits. And I saw those bands. I saw the Bad Brains 20 times, in 81 and 82. I saw the Misfits, probably 10 times, and I saw, Minor Threat. When Minor Threat came back I think it was at 82, we were excited because they came around the first time and broke up. Then they got back together, and we were stoked. They put out of Step, and like we saw them a bunch of times because those bands were just great, man. I mean, those bands, whew, they were great.
Before we continue, I just want to take a quick moment to just mention that sometimes things get sticky, and you know what sticks, Drew? Riot stickers. Riot stickers are very, very sticky stickers. They are the sponsor of the Frumess channel. And we have a special promotion that we are running with Riot stickers. It's our favorite promotion that we do with Riot stickers. For $79, you can get 1,000 3-inch by 3-inch stickers with free shipping. That is an unbelievable value and deal. So if you have an image, if you have iconography that you're trying to get out there, that you're trying to slap on the back of a public bus, or the back of a car, or on some street sign, you go to riotstickers.com/Frumess. That's FRUMESS. Link is down in the description. Make sure you stop by Drew Stone's website and check out his YouTube channel as well, which is also down in the description. And check out Riot Stickers. Let's play our little theme song, and we'll be right back with more Drew Stone. Drew, I have a question for you.
We make stickers, banners, and buttons too, posters and promo cards. There's nothing we can't print for you. From stage backdrops to bass drum heads, we can print on shirts, we can print on hats, we can print on pants. Cheap prices and high quality, quick turnaround times and free shipping. We also offer free artwork support, great customer service, and so much more. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb. RiotStickers.com, Riot Stickers, we are the bomb.
And that is a promise. Okay.
What a very cool sponsor you have, Riot Stickers.
Riot
That's
Stickers,
very cool. Good for you, man. I know how important it is to have a cool sponsor. Hey, can I Jody 138 asks about my Misfit show.
Well, I was gonna. That's literally what we were gonna.
I'll answer that
right into. Go ahead, do it.
I'll answer that.
Cousin Jody.
I saw a bunch of Misfit shows, and some of the standout shows that I remember. In I think it was 82 in Boston, when I was still in Boston, they rented out the basement of the Cambridge church, and the Misfits played. Where was that, Larry? It was the Cambridge. Forgot what the Cambridge church, and it was one of those things where we used to go in and be like, hey, can we rent the church? It's a new wave dance party. And then the fucking Misfits come in. And the place, there's 500 kids in the place. It went crazy. So I was at that show was great. The channel shows when the Misfits played the channel twice. The second time they played, we opened up for them when I was in the High and the Mighty, and that was cool. And also, I saw the Misfits at Great Gildersleeves in Manhattan, and that was an interesting show because I brought my little brother, and people think back, romanticize about the early Misfits stuff, and a lot of the shows, weren't packed, and I think that's part of the reason they broke up in 83. And this Gildersleeve show was like half filled. And I remember people were like heckling the band and stuff. And so I remember those shows. But that Cambridge basement show was off the hook. That first channel show was off the hook. The Misfits were a lot of fun. They were like our Kiss, they were great. And then, of course, later when I joined Antidote, Arthur Googie, who was in the Misfits, was the drummer in Antidote. when I first joined Antidote in 1984, after I was in the High and the Mighty, and I got to play with Googie for a while in Antidote. So that was cool.
Okay, a few questions from a Misfits nerd now.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Question number one: the Cambridge Church show?
Uh-huh.
First of all, did you know a guy, Chris Corkum?
Of course.
So
Yes,
Chris
Yeah,
was like,
of course.
Chris was on. I'm sure he was on your channel too. He was on my channel always with his dog Bo. Remember,
Didn't Chris have a Misfits band, like a Misfits cover band?
138. Yep.
Yeah.
And he passed away because of COVID.
Of course.
Shout out to Chris. He was a wonderful, wonderful dude. I had him on my show, and Chris
Corkum's in the Boston Hardcore film I directed.
Oh, is he really? Okay,
Yeah,
I have to see that.
Watch it on Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. We'll put a link in the description.
Yeah,
Chris, when I had Chris on the show, because he was like, he would always comment, he'd be like, yeah, I used to see the Misfits. It's like, dude, come on the show, talk about it.
Yeah.
He was telling me, here's something that he said about, I think it was the Cambridge show.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when they shot the Brain Eaters music video, but that they were planning to
I don't believe that was a Cambridge show.
You would know better than me.
That was the first, I believe, could be wrong, but I thought that was the first channel show. It was the first channel show.
Okay.
Because Red Shark Video shot the channel show, and that's the footage that you see online of that infamous Misfits at the channel was shot by Red Shark Video, and Red Shark Video are the ones who did the Brain Eaters video. And as legend would have it, they also did a video for Skulls, which has never really seen the light of day.
So when I had Chris on my show, and I haven't watched the show since it happened, so I don't remember what exactly he said, but he brought, he was like, yeah, there was going to be another music video, and the thing with the skulls, there was going to be blood shooting out of somebody's head or something. That was his shred of a memory from, decades ago. But what about a London Dungeon music video?
That I don't know anything about. That I don't know anything about. I mean, when I did the Boston Hardcore film, I connected with Rick from Red Shark Video, and he sort of gave me the details about what they did that day. And he mentioned that, he still has the Skulls video, but he's like an honorable man who would not release something like that unless he got Glenn's blessing. And, and so it's just sort of, I think it might be lost in the shifting sands of time,
Wait, so there is an intact copy somewhere of the Skulls music video?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know specific, but he told me they did shoot from what I remember, they did shoot footage for a Skulls video.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's the type of stuff that, my God. Now, let me ask you this question. What, from your point of view, being around back then, seeing the Misfits, blah, 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 all that, how did Boston kind of inform the Misfits sound as they sort of went more and more into that hardcore direction from your point of view?
Well, I think Boston might have been part of it, but it was just sort of what was in the air. I mean, Misfits also, I think they recorded Earth AD. I think didn't Spot from Black Flag record that in his studio. So, I mean, Black Flag, Henry Rollins was a big Misfits fan, and Henry Rollins ended up in Black Flag. And that's just the way a lot of bands, there was that 1 year there where things just got hard and heavy. And, a lot of bands sort of, they might have been hard, before, but they sort of leaned into that direction a little bit more based on kind of what was going on in the community. And, the Misfits, Boston was a special place for the Misfits. Misfits played three, I'm tempted to say iconic shows towards the end of their run, which was the Cambridge Church show, the first channel show, and the second channel show. And like I said, I was in the High and the Mighty, and we opened up for them for the last channel show, which I only realized much later on that was the second to last show they did before breaking up in 1983.
So that was going to be my next question, because I always thought that it was the Great Gildersleeve show that was their second to last show. They did the Santa Monica Civic show with Black Flag in front of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And then Great Gildersleeves, and then Detroit. But I don't know. I thought I mean, clearly it was one of the last shows at some point. Yes, Aaron, we are live.
I'm looking it up because
I will always ultimately defer to Drew because
well there's
quite
a site, there's a site here you go, misfitscentral.com.
Yes,
right?
so I know
there's a timeline on there.
Yep.
And I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
According to let me see, timeline.
Can I just say, everybody, while Drew's looking this up, everybody go watch the show with Chris Corkum, because he was just such an awesome dude, and I was so glad to have him on my show and like meet him, and like, you know, speaking of like making friends through the internet and stuff, and he had a dog that he really loved named Bo. So shout out to Bo, and shout out to Chris Corkum and his memory, and just a great guy, really. What does it say, Drew? Did you?
I found the site. I'm just having a hard time finding. Oh, tour dates. Is this it? Ah, found it. So according to this, it was Santa Monica Civic Auditorium,
right?
Then Gildersleeves,
right?
Then Love Hall in Philly. I actually saw that show. I saw that show too. I was at that show. Antidote, before I joined, played. Then the Channel Club, and then the last show in Detroit.
Oh, okay. So Gildersleeves was Gildersleeves was not quite the last show.
That's another show I saw. I saw the July 8th, 1983 Love Hall show in Philly. Yeah.
Any memories or recollections from that or anything?
I remember seeing Antidote for the first time and thinking they were pretty damn great.
Wow. And that was, so Googie was playing with his former
Googie
band.
was out. Googie was out by then. Googie was an Antidote. Googie
That's right. Yeah.
Googie was an Antidote. The first time I saw them, that was with their original singer. And, and then eventually what happened was, I became friends with the guitar player, and we were doing shows together. We played in DC, and on the they split from the singer, and I ended up in the band after that.
Right. And you were in the band for a spell.
Yeah, I was in the band for a long time in the early 80s, but we sort of took things in a different direction when I joined, and we got into the rock stuff and the metal stuff, and it's an interesting story. It came back around. Then we didn't play for like 16 years, and we did like an A7 reunion show in I think 2008, and it was just very well attended, and we were very well received. And after that, we
let's keep doing it.
Yeah, we just kept doing it for a while, and then more or less that kind of segued into what I'm doing now, which is
tell me about that real quick before we move on.
So basically, Antidote mutated into Antidote NYHC, which basically eventually was rebranded to Incendiary Device, which is what we are now. And we put a record out 2 years ago on Bridge 9 Records, and we're in the recording studio now, and we have a bunch of shows coming up, and we're playing Punk Rock Bowling with 7 Seconds and Negative Approach, and we're doing Crash Fest in San Francisco. And Incendiary Device is the band I'm in, and I just really love doing it. I love the guys I'm in the band with, and I love the material. It's my material. It's material that I could sing. I'm not singing some stuff that somebody else sang, and we're, it's the band's slowly but surely gaining some momentum, and it's a nice place to be with some guys that I really like playing with.
Hey, I've seen you sing "The Devil Went Down to Georgia," which was very strange. That was a very strange. I was not expecting that at a New York matinee. Very fun. Let me talk about that real quick before we move on, because I want to talk about the movie that I want to talk about the Michael Alago movie. But this is a good segue into that. How are we doing, by the way? Are you
I'm good?
You're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's keep going for a little bit.
I'm good. Yeah, we could. I could do at least up to another half hour if you want.
Yeah. Let's do that. All right. So, so I, I recently reconnected with Bobby Steele, who is, someone I've known for some time now in a variety of different ways and roads and avenues and whatnot. And he and Diana were like, you gotta come see us, man. Come see us at we're doing the New York Hardcore, Sunday matinee, which I mean, has been going on in New York City so real quick, before I even continue that, can you just give a primer real quick, Drew? Because let you say it instead of me say it. Explain what the New York Hardcore matinee was back in the day and what it is and how you continued it on and whatnot.
Well, I'll put it to you like this. What we're doing now is the Back to the New York Hardcore Roots series. They are free, all ages Sunday matinees down in the Lower East Side, mostly at a place called the Bowery Electric, which is literally half a block from CBGB's.
Great
venue.
And
what we do is basically in the spirit of the old CBGB's matinees. They're all the shows are all ages. They're Sunday matinees, and our shows are free. So they're free Sunday all ages matinees, half a block from the old CBGB's. And basically, in the spirit of those matinees that we loved so much back then, where the community came together and everybody would hang out. And that's sort of what we've managed to create, establish, and keep going. And Larry's in the chat room, Larry Kelly. And
it's Larry. Okay. Yeah. I met Larry.
Hey, Larry. You met Larry, and Larry is a huge part of what we do. We have a group of people, Larry Kelly and Ray Hogan and
Brian.
And Brian and a couple of others. And the 59th show, we've done the 59th show is coming up. And it's just great. And what it does for a lot of bands, I mean, we really try to treat bands with respect. A lot of bands play a lot of crummy gigs. It's real tough. Well, when they come to play one of our shows, they get treated with respect. They play one of the best sounding rooms in New York with one of the best soundmen in New York. And, the room's always crowded with people. And the shows are just fantastic. So, we've managed to, keep it going for the past couple years. Jesse Mallon, who's an old hardcore kid, is really the patron saint of the whole thing. And it really brings me a lot of joy to do it. Like that show that you were at and the show that we just did, it's just fantastic.
No, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
And part of what we do, and me and Larry work really hard on this, is we try to create eclectic bills. Right? It's not just like 5 hardcore bands or 5 punk bands or 5 Afro punk bands or 5 oi drinking bands. Or we really try to create these eclectic bills that bring different crowds together and bring different bands together. So there'll be like a punk band, a hardcore band, a ska band, So I think a big part of the success of the series is that we put together these eclectic bills.
And now I just want to say, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Larry in the live chat right now, and a shout out to Brian. And I believe I met Ray. I'm not sure if I met Ray. I think
Ray was there.
Ray was there.
I don't know if Ray was at that show.
Okay. In any case, a shout out to Ray either which way. But real quick, I just want to add to to piggyback on what Drew was saying from my point of view. I was invited, Bobby and Diana invited me to cut from the Undead, said, come see us play. And, I hadn't seen the Undead in a very long time. So it's like, all right, yeah, sure. So I decided, because it was an all ages show, I was like, let me bring my 9-year-old son, Jordan, whose only ever experience at a live show was a Green Jello show, which again, no disrespect to Green Jello, was kind of a mistake. That was also billed as an all ages show, but that was a very different environment that I would not have done in retrospect. Either which way, I brought my son down. I wasn't really sure what to expect. And I have to tell you, Larry was so welcoming. Drew was welcoming. Brian was like, I say this affectionately, was like a golem, like hovering around myself and my son, just in case, just to sort of, because he saw that my son was young and he just wanted to make sure that my son, he was keeping an eye out for my son's well-being. And I thought it was absolutely wonderful. 1,000 different people saw it. He was trying to, I brought earplugs for him, but we couldn't find the over the head earmuffs. And 1,000 people were like, do you need earplugs? Do you need earplugs? Like, everybody was so like, oh, do you need water? Like all this stuff. And I was like, wow, what a wonderful sort of environment for someone. You know, it was my first experience at one of these types of things. I got to go to CBGB's at the tail end of CBGB's. I saw John Joseph play with the Bad Brains Jam at CBGB's and TSOL and some other stuff. It was very it was a gnarly sort of thing. So to see this kind of, you know, environment where a child could actually, you know, enjoy himself or at least experience something new, it was really, really nice. That's all I wanted to say about it. It's just, it was nice.
Let me say this. I can curse on the show, right?
Of course.
So basically what you just said is the reason that we put up and deal with all the fucking bullshit.
Well, I got to tell you one thing, though, that really, you know, it was kind of interesting. I got to tell you, I saw this kid that was, you know, he was a young kid and he was like, he had no self-awareness. He was doing like this sort of skank moshing in this very tight quarters. And my son was right behind him and Brian was standing right there kind of, and this kid was just not very self-aware of his surroundings. And my first reaction was like, what is this friggin', you know, this goober is being a goober right now. You know, he's got these spiky bracelets on. I'm like, dude, you could take someone like they're like, what are you doing? And you know, he's wearing these patches, these patches, these stupid patches. And whatever.
Well, that's why the next show we're back at the Bowery Electric. Berlin's a very tight space.
Tight quarters. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the Bowery Electric, people can dance the way they want down on the floor and get crazy. You know, our shows attract a lot of people. They attract a lot of young people, and
which is sometimes
good. Sometimes young people get super aggressive with their dancing, and you know that's been a little bit of an issue lately because you have other people that just want to come to the show. Some older people, and you know what it comes down to. It comes down to what Creature from Rebel Matic said to me. You got to read the room.
You gotta read the room.
And a lot of young people, man, listen, you know, I was
15, 16.
I was 18 once too, going to shows and trying to be like the hardest dancer there. So
that's what I see. I saw that. First of all, I looked at this kid because initially I was getting really sort of annoyed. I looked at this kid and I said, he's like, he's got to be 16, 15 years old. He's out. He's expressing himself for the first time or whatever. He's doing his thing. We were all that age.
It's a blessing. It's a blessing and a curse, man. Doing all ages shows is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing. It's a blessing in the regard that a lot of the older bands play our shows and they're like, holy shit, we haven't played to like that many young people in years. And like young people are dancing and there's all this young energy in the room. On the other hand, the curse is that you got fucking kids that are underage and they're sneak drinking on the sidewalk. They're puking all over the sidewalk. They're coming in. They're acting. You know, they're acting the fool. You know. So, you know what? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And me and Larry, you know,
well, hats off to you guys. Hats off.
In the end, more so than not, it's a joyous occasion, and we rise above the bullshit, you know.
Now I'm going to commandeer the conversation for a second because I want to take a moment. It's very important. One of the people that was there who I was not expecting to be there, who I instantaneously recognized because I knew he was a person of note in a variety of different ways, but not to the extent that I thought I knew until I watched the documentary about him. I see Michael Alago there. I'm like, holy shit, there's Michael Alago. This is so cool. And my son was there. And I know that Michael Alago had signed Metallica. That's like, you know, one of these things that he's known for. And my son had gone through this period of like, he was really, really into Metallica. And so, you know, and so I started talking to Michael Alago, and which was nice. And he'd come from an exhibit. He was seeing a Yoko Ono photography exhibit of some kind.
Sounds like something Alago would go to. Yeah.
And he really is, you know, he really is. I had spoken to him before. I had bumped into him here and there over, you know, whatever. He is such a nice, personable sweetheart of a man. I can't even begin, like, just easy to talk to, someone who doesn't have any pretension or air, somebody who is happy to just, you know, speak to people. And he took the time, you know, to sit and just talk to my son. And my son is talking with Michael Alago, and I'm taking like a taking a picture because I'm like, this is what a cool sort of memory this is and whatnot. And I say, hey, I said to my son, I was like, did you know that he knows Metallica? And my son's like, what? Blah, blah, blah. But, and so Mike, wanting to, you know, be like, you know, really like make my son flirty, he looks through his phone to find a photo of him and James. But my son, who knows Metallica, but doesn't know the guys in Metallica, he showed him the photo. He didn't know. My son didn't know it was James from Metallica, but it was still really nice and nice dude. And so I sat and I watched. Who the fuck is this guy, or who the fuck is that guy?
Who the fuck is that guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago.
Yeah. And I love that it's a fabulous journey because it really is a goddamn fabulous journey. And, you know, like, first of all, you know, I'm going to blow a little smoke up your ass, not because you're my guest, because you really did craft a wonderful historical document about a guy who, as far as I know, does not have a autobiography or biography yet in some sort of written form. I mean, this is an important person that needed to be documented in an important way. And you did that. And not only did you do it, you know, well, it was short, it was sweet, it was a nice 74 minutes. You got like everybody you could possibly friggin' imagine. So what is it like friggin' interviewing Johnny Rotten and Cyndi Lauper and the guys in Metallica, and you got Cherry Vanilla in there, and you had Danny Fields in there, and you had, like, you know, my God, man, all the people you had. Tell me about that. Tell me about that experience.
Well, thank you. It is a great film, and I don't say that about all my films. You know, that film, sometimes with these projects, things line up, and you're waiting on heat down the middle, and it's heat down the middle, and bam, you know, and that's what that was. And the Alago film, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of it. It's a great film, and I'm not saying that because I did it. It's just it's a great film. There's a first act, a second act, a third act, a fourth act. It's edited well. It's just a great film.
The editing was really well. Is really well done, for real.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And you know what else is great? Hold on, real quick. I want to say this too. The way that you present the history of New York City and the New York music and art scene, you know, it's so easy to get mired down in the weeds of like, how do you explore this narrative? And we go through, you know, we see it through Michael's eyes, and you literally go out, you shot some wonderful B-roll, you have him there, you got your, you got your videography game is on point. You're following him around in the streets. In any other context, it might even kind of seem like, you know, a little like hokey, but it worked so well for this particular avenue, especially because it's Michael telling his story. It's not just the talking heads.
Yeah, I mean, if like Jody 138, if you want to check it out, it's on Amazon. It's
we'll put that link down in the description too.
Yeah, who the fuck is that guy? The Fabulous Journey of Michael Alago. You know, interviewing those people were great. Interviewing Johnny Lydon was a big deal to me personally.
Oh, I bet.
You know, I was a little nervous about that one because I've seen him like destroy people in interviews.
Oh my God.
But you know, that was a big one. And of course the Metallica guys were incredibly gracious. It was, you know, they were great, and you know, the whole thing, putting it together. But John Lydon was a big one for me, in my world. And you know, the interview just with me and him just really hit it off. And and it just really went great. And I did the New York Hardcore Chronicles film was actually kind of done simultaneously.
Oh,
because
really?
the Alago film was taking a long. You know what? It took a year to clear all
bet.
the music and shit for the Alago film. And in that year that I was clearing stuff, the New York Hardcore Chronicles film got kind of done and released 2 weeks before the Alago film. So it's one thing to go through this whole process and put a film out. You spend a couple of years making it, and it finally comes out. You do the rounds with the film. But in my case, at that time, I had 2 films come out within 2 weeks of each other, and they both had were received very well, and like it was a really, really special time for me and my career. I really that those 2 films put me on the map in a big way very quickly. And because before that I did the Boston hardcore film, and of course I had my music video career and this and that. But when those 2 films came out, back to back within 2 weeks of each other, and the Alago film was in the movie theaters for a minute, and it was really a special time, and I'll never forget it. And it was a once in a lifetime. It was a once in a lifetime thing to have happen like that. And the Alago film's great, and Alago's like a part of my my family loves him. He talks to my mom more than I do. He's like Alago. We love Michael Alago.
He really is a treasure, man. He really is a treasure, especially.
Absolutely.
And I really loved that. Obviously, his you delved into his health issues, and because it's a huge part of his story. But
Sure.
it's kind of amazing when you think back to, like, say, COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And you think things that I thought about when COVID was happening was like, this happened already in recent memory, but it happened to the LGBTQ population in New York City, and nobody gave a shit, like nobody cared. And it made me wonder what some of those people must have thought, like, oh, now you see, like, we've been through this already once before.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really good that, anytime that gets highlighted, because a lot of people were just, they were issued a death sentence. They were like, this is like, you're done. You're done. There was
Right.
and the fact, like, to hear like how harrowing that the ups and downs, only to, be at the end of that era where you could get the medication that you need to endure. I mean, just really incredible. Really incredible. Truly. You had how was Doyle when you interviewed him? He seemed really, because if you watch interviews with Doyle, he does not like to be interviewed. He seemed like he was really loose when you spoke to him.
Well, like I said, I go way back with Doyle and Jerry and those guys. So Doyle's an old friend, and Michael Alago signed the Misfits to Geffen.
Oh, I didn't know that in the 90s.
Yeah,
I did not.
That's
know
right.
That. Oh.
Michael Alago, when he was with Geffen Records,
right, that makes sense,
signed the Misfits to Geffen. He's the one that connected them with Daniel Ray to produce American Psycho.
And Daniel Ray, a lot of people don't realize this, but Daniel Ray is absolutely part of the secret sauce of the Misfits in the 90s. Yeah. On both of those records, he did a lot
those
of
those two. I'm a big fan of both those records. I'm a big fan of what is it?
American Psycho and
American
Famous Monsters.
Right. I like those. I like both those records a lot. I love Michael Graves' voice. I know Michael Graves is a controversial character, but I had a lot of good times with that guy on the road. Right. In '97, I did the whole. I was managing a band called Sub-Zero, and Jerry.
Yeah, you were on tour with them
in Europe, and that was the first Misfits tour ever of Europe, right? So
they were in the Green Hell bus.
Well, no, we drove. We had our own Winnebago, but it was a very exciting time because the Misfits were playing like Milan, Italy, Paris, France, every night was the first time.
Yeah.
First time. And my band Sub-Zero was in the direct support slot, and it was great. And we all traveled together, and Alago was there as well. And so I have a history. When I joined Antidote, we rehearsed a couple of times in Jerry and Doyle's parents' house. And so
wait, were you wait. So you were in the maybe you told this to me already on the street when I was talking with you and Alago. I think you actually mentioned this. You rehearsed in that the pool house, the little pool house, right?
I remember being I remember being in a basement, but I could be wrong. It was a long time ago.
You would know better than me.
Yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you remember stalactites like in a cave, like stalactites hanging down from the ceiling?
No, but I remember later on in the 90s, when at Pro Edge, their dad's company, they rehearsed like in a barn. It was like they had a room set up like in a barn, and I remember all that kind of stuff in there. But originally in the 80s, I don't remember that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so
cool. But Doyle's great. Doyle's a friend. I text Doyle all the time, and I know Doyle's a tough interview, but for me and Alago, I like Doyle a lot. I connected with Doyle. We're both the same age, and we have a history together. So I'm trying to get him on my show, but it's tough.
That's what I'm saying. Like it's got to be like
what it is. You know what it is. Doyle doesn't have a lot to say, and he doesn't want to be interviewed, and he's a person. He's very personal guy, and he doesn't want to talk about like his personal life and this and that. And he doesn't really want to talk about the Misfits, Like Doyle's a private person, and he appreciates people that respect his privacy. It's not for everyone. This shit is not for everyone. Not everybody wants to be talking about themselves and self-promoting.
Very true. Very true. So what was it like working? Because Rob Zombie was a producer on this.
No, Rob Zombie didn't produce the Alago film. Was it? Oh, he was. He was an executive producer.
He was an executive producer. Yeah.
Rob, you know what? We shot Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie was really great, but when I showed Rob Zombie the rough cut, he didn't like the film. He did not like the film. He didn't get it.
Oh my God.
He didn't get it. He did not like it. And we sort of stopped communicating after that.
Weird.
And one thing that I learned about making films, and it could just be for anything, is that this person, when you ask a director what their opinion is of a film, they will tell you what they would do if they were directing the film.
Yes, that's true.
You ask Rob Zombie, and he's going to be like, well, you should have done this, this, and this. You ask this guy, and he'll say that, and that. So I'll keep it in the eye. When I'm directing a film, it comes down in the end.
I know where you got that from. I'll keep it in the eye.
I just, it comes to a certain point where you have to execute your vision, and you have to do what you want to do. You have to.
But when you show somebody your work, there's two types of ways to show someone your work. I want to show you my work. I want your opinion. Do you want? I've watched your work. Do you want my opinion? Or do you you know what I'm saying? Like,
9 out of 10 times, when you ask someone their opinion, they're a director, they will tell you why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? They would do as a director.
Right.
So then you realize, you know what? Fuck that. It's my vision.
Yeah.
It's my vision, and I'm going to execute it. And that's what's important. And that's what I did with the Alago film. In the end, it was, fuck that. I'm going to make the film. I'm going to put out my vision and the film that I want to make. And that's what I did. And the film's fucking great. So
what was it like hanging out, chatting with Danny Fields?
Danny's cool. Danny's really tight with Alago. Danny Fields is like Alago's mentor. So those two are very, very close. There wasn't, these people weren't just people we were interviewing, sort of randomly
Right.
Or-
I figure that on some level they're all connected to Alago in some way, which makes it, easier to like
Cindy Lauper, these are all people that Alago, did stuff with their career and
Right.
and and stuff like that. So they all loved Alago and bent over backwards and wanted to see this thing happen and were very accommodating. Cindy Lauper, Rob Zombie, Phil Anselmo from Pantera. The Metallica guys were incredibly accommodating. We had a great day out in San Rafael in their rehearsal space, hanging out with them, and when I interviewed James and Lars and Kirk Hammett, it was great.
I mean, sorry, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
But interviewing like Phil from Pantera and even the Metallicas, these are guys I've met before and I've known before. So it was a big difference that and interviewing John Lydon, who like in my world, there's only a couple people that I got nervous about. Like there's only a handful of people in the world today that would sort of get me a little nervous. John Lydon was one of them. Now Roger Waters, Bob Dylan, there's a couple others that are still alive. I got a question
for you about Roger Waters, but not on the air.
Yeah, I don't really. I steer away from all like the politics and stuff.
I know. But I know that you
social media.
Yeah, but I know that just seeing, as soon as you said Roger Waters, and then I thought about like another movie that you made, and I don't know, thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Right.
But wow. So like what happens on the day that you're going to interview John Lydon? You come in there, you
want to hear the Lydon story? You want to hear the Lydon story?
Well, no, I don't want to hear the Lydon. Don't tell me the Lydon story. I definitely don't want to hear it.
So here's the Lydon story. So we're out in LA. Me and Alago. Yeah. And it's the day before we're supposed to interview Lydon at his house in Malibu. And I say, call John, ask him, do we need to bring anything? So Alago calls Lydon, and Lydon says, yeah, I want a bottle of tequila, a case of Corona, and a carton of Marlboro Reds, right? And he wanted some kind of tequila, like with the worm in it. Some really now at this point, me and Alago are clean and sober many, many years. But so we, to the T, we got the tequila, we got the case of Corona, and we got the carton of Marlboro Reds, and we show up the next morning at his house. I got like the case of Corona and I got the bottle of tequila, and he opens up the door and he says, oh, you got all that stuff. I was only kidding. Right. But wait a second. But listen, he wasn't kidding. It was a lot like the Van Halen Brown M&M thing. He wanted to see if we were paying attention and if we really gave a shit,
Interesting.
So right away we walked in and he things went in a good direction. He really saw that,
passed the litmus test.
We were paying attention, we were paying attention. And so I start talking to him about, hey, where do you want to do the interview? And, we didn't want to do it by the pool or, so he takes me around and underneath his house and like under the foundation against this brick wall. I interview him.
Yeah, it was a brick wall.
And me and him start talking, and like I turn the camera on and we just start talking, and we just have this incredible conversation, really centered around New York City. Because I remember he lived in New York City at a certain point, and I used to see him around, and I knew where he lived because there was a club right there. And I used to go to this club a lot. And so we connected about New York back then, and we're going back and forth and just did this incredible interview. And what I realized was a lot of people ambush him on they want to talk about the Sex Pistols and Sid Vicious, and they want to see the monster Johnny Rotten. You know what I mean? Like, personally, I don't give a fuck about that. And he really appreciated, and we really clicked over about, you know, Alago and the film and New York and stuff like that. And, you know, we really hit it off, and we've been friends ever since. So that was like one of the great interviews that I've done.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like who he is, and you know, the idea of like the impact that band and that record had in sort of exploding this.
He changed the face of modern music, bro. There's certain, like, just from where I stand, when certain people carry on about, oh, I don't like the Sex Pistols, they sucked, or Bob Dylan, or Nirvana. You know, when people start bad-mouthing those bands, what you say to me is, you're a fucking idiot. Because it doesn't matter what your opinion is. Your opinion is, these are bands that changed the face of music history. So whatever you think, you're sure, you have your opinion, great, but they changed the face of modern music. You know, the Beatles. It's like,
wait, you do like the Beatles, though, right, Drew?
Listen, music is my life.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh, they suck.
Yeah, but the Beatles are literally one of those bands. In the same breath that you said all those other bands, the Beatles were that too. But they were there, you know, earlier. But they're the same way.
They changed the face of modern music. These are bands that changed the face of modern music.
Exactly.
You know, people will carry on about they suck or this and that.
No, I hate that. I hate that. Anybody who tells me that they think that the Beatles suck is just like, I'm like, come on, get out of here, man. Like, for real, you know, like, really.
Whatever. People like to pontificate and be negative, especially on social media. That's okay, and everybody's has their opinion. Good for you. But you know, these are bands that, you know.
I got to tell you, I had Cheetah Chrome on my show recently, and I saw him in your documentary, and he is such the way that he talks, I like was not expecting him. He's so like fast paced when he talks. He talks like a mile a minute, and he's such a character.
Cheetah's a character for sure.
He's a character. I didn't know that Alago was ran a Dead Boy fanzine. Anyway, listen, this has been a really wonderful show. I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing like really interesting stories, especially that Johnny Rotten story was really, really freaking cool to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and you know, thanks for supporting the stuff I do, everybody out there. And I see some new faces in the chat room. Some people probably getting exposed to me for the first time. You know, check me out. The New York Hardcore Chronicles.
Description. Yeah, we have it.
Yep. You could just Google Drew Stone, and my stuff will come up. And I have a bunch of films on Amazon Prime now, and I'm really grateful, and I appreciate all the support through the years. And thank you, Jeff, and thank you everybody out there.
Keep doing it. Keep doing it. I really do.
And I want to shout out my friends Astoria Lou and Larry Kelly and Ray Hogan and everybody down there that makes the shows happen, and especially my wife, Rochelle Lynn, whom I love very much.
Oh, yeah. Mazel tov to you. You got married, right?
Yeah, I did.
You did. You did. Mazel tov. Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. That's wonderful. Yeah. All right. We have the way that we say, Drew, hang on for 2 seconds. The way we say goodbye on the show, we say peace, hair grease, and we will see you next time. Go check out. I mean, literally, Drew is so consistent with the New York Hardcore Chronicles live stream, man. Like, what is it? It's every Wednesday and Sunday?
It's usually every Sunday, but once a month when we have the Bowery Electric show, we skip the Sunday and I do a Wednesday show.
No, I mean the YouTube. The
YouTube is usually on Sundays, except on a Sunday once a month when we have the Bowery Electric show. Right. I do a Wednesday show. So on an average on a month, it's like 3 Sundays and a Wednesday.
And he's got, man, I mean, this guy is a jugger. He's a tour de force interviewer, man. He's got everybody under the sun. He's got everybody. He's got everybody.
Right on.
Drew, wait. One last thing before we go. All right. So how did I do?
Mhm.
How did I do?
You were great. It
I
was
was
nice.
Yeah.
You're a good interviewer, and
Really?
you run a good show.
Hold on. Are
And,
you just saying that because we're
yeah.
still live right now, or you really think that?
No, you're good.
Oh,
You know, you're good.
All right. Drew, hang on 1 second.